CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thank you for tuning in. Everybody, I've been working on bringing this man on CMMS Radio for quite a while. You might recognize him. If you don't, let me tell you who he is. His name's David Trask. He is with ARC Facilities, and you also might know him as the host of Facility Voices. And we met recently in Anaheim. There was a conference out there. I call it the Ashy Conference. We got to chopping it up a little bit and said, man, let's do an episode together. So we're finally here. And David Trask, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Hey, thanks so much, my friend.
Yeah. So when I chime in, like on LinkedIn, which is where I kind of focus and play around, love connecting with people and figuring out who's real, who's not. And either way, we just want to make the industry better. So I'm focused on CMMS, which is computerized maintenance management software. And I try to get to the two M's in the middle, the maintenance management, the maintenance mindset. And for you, one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about right away is with your podcast. It's been around a little under 2 years, and you get to talk to all these great people, but you can bring this kind of perspective from, so I'm always calling you on LinkedIn a road warrior, because you just bam, bam, moving around everywhere. You're doing facility walks, you're doing commissioning and all this. But we were just talking a little bit about the podcast and how I'll use the term that you used. It offers a kind of a brain dump when you bring someone on. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and why that's so kind of satisfying and meaningful for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel that, for the longest time, people in the world of facilities, directors, even some of the C-suite in operations, no one ever asks them what they're doing, and what's working, what's not working. And essentially, Facility Voices is a platform to I call it therapy. It's a place where they can share what's working, what's not working, but more importantly, it's a vehicle for other people to tune in and grab a nugget or two that they might be able to think about or put into practice at their place. And these people have just been amazing. I mean, they share the behind the curtain. It's literally pulling the curtain back and seeing what's working and sharing some of those really, really fun stories and some of them not so great, but that's the way we learn too.
Well, so for me, I deal with all kinds of different people. I shouldn't say deal with, but I like to invite them on, but I have all these conversations off mic where part of me is like, man, it'd be cool if we could hear that. And some of that we can't really put on a podcast because it's a little too out there. And what I mean by that is, maintenance people that are in this kind of world, whether it's facilities, manufacturing, all the things in between, they're not going to pull any punches. And it's something that you will find a lot of passion for. Like people that are in this industry, that stay in this industry, typically have a certain passion for it. So I want to switch gears a little bit back to ARC Facilities, because one of the things I was talking to you about in Anaheim was I basically said something to the effect of, man, you are everywhere doing all this stuff and you don't seem to miss a beat. And I said something like, how the heck do you do it? And you were talking about how much you love it. So what I'm interested in hearing is how you got into it in the first place when it comes to the overall facilities management and maintenance space. And then more about that concept of how it just kind of drives you and you're all about it.
It's funny. I think in many cases, a lot of facilities folks kind of stumble in. They didn't plan on going into facilities, they didn't plan on going into maintenance. And just like I never planned on jumping into the industry, but at the same time, what I found a passion for is listening. Hearing those stories and asking those tough questions. When somebody says, "Oh, well, I'm having a problem with X," I was asking a lot of whys. Why is it working? And what I found is they're so open. And in facilities, unlike a lot of industries, facilities folks aren't in competition with each other. They're not. They lean on each other, and they also, it's a big community. Across different verticals, healthcare, schools, municipalities, even manufacturing, they know each other. And what happens is they lean on each other because at the end of the day, they really don't want to have to reinvent a wheel. And a lot of them have gone through the same types of things over the years. I think where I really jumped in and where I started was, Arc Facilities is part of our parent company is Arc Document Solutions. They're the biggest blueprinter in the world. So they've been working with uh, the design construction folks, the owners to a certain degree. But I was dealing directly with the owners. I was doing a little bit of the design construction side and the GC side, and the architect side, but I was doing a lot of work with the owners, because they have a whole color division doing large format graphics and wall graphics and all of that. That's kind of my background. But as I was meeting with a lot of these folks, I'm looking around, and man, there were piles of stuff, just binders and rolls of drawings all over the place. And again, I started asking, what is that stuff, and then why is it in paper? It's just, back then it was, everything was starting to really make that digital evolution, and I'm like, you guys are still digging through drawings? Why? And then the truths start coming out of, we don't want it, we've got it, and this is what we're stuck with. So we started building something to fix that. That was our core mission, was let's fix that. And what's funny is I'm the blueprinter telling you to stop printing. But it's the truth. I mean, but at the end of the day, what it really came down to is, to do my job, I couldn't find the stuff to do my job. And, information's king. And we really tried to address that head on, and fill a void that nobody really seemed like they were able to fix.
That's and I think that's the like for me when I think about services, technology, you combine the two, software as a service, and what we're seeing out here. So in the world that I play in, where we talk about the maintenance management software, I always am wondering how and why did it really come into existence, a particular solution. And when we move a little bit off center on that, and we look at what you guys are doing with that technology, and then of course the facility services themselves that you do, it all is typically born out of a real problem that somebody has, and they have to figure out a way to solve it. And then another thing that comes up often in conversations is, why are there so many of these different types of solutions? And it's because everybody tends to work at least a little bit differently. There might be some foundational elements that are essentially the same, and then we kind of want things that match what we already know how to do really, really well. So they're going to be very nuanced and different. So switching back into what you do, we see, and when I say we, people on LinkedIn, we see that you're going to these different facilities. Like recently, you've been at least a handful of different medical type, healthcare type environments and facilities, where I call it commissioning, where you're moving through the facility and you might be, for example, labeling assets or labeling shutoffs. And when you're doing that, you're probably gathering data all at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, it's essentially, it's twofold. It's field validating what's really out there against, now the buildings you're referring to, that recently anyway, some of them are brand new. They weren't even occupied yet, which is unique, has its own unique things too, because everything's new, but nothing's labeled, or some things are labeled. Other things are older buildings, and where we go in after the fact, and they're 80-year-old buildings. And what the challenges with that is, it may be labeled, but it's got five labels, because they've switched work order systems five
Yep.
times, they switched asset systems, four times, or whatever that. But also the nomenclature is all over the board too. Um, so I think where we've really filled the void is validating what's really out there, but more importantly, it's mapping, where is it now. A lot of others, and I don't ever disparage any other systems ever. And I think the important reason I don't is because they've all got their niche, like you said, they've all got their lane. Where we found a lane was filling the void that a lot of those don't. And that is, CMMSs tell you, when it's time to go do something. It doesn't necessarily provide the documentation as to, your MEP, blueprints or the manuals or, even some of the warranty information. But more importantly, where we found a big void is that stuff, but also physically, where is it in the building? What ceiling tile do you pop to find that, fan coil unit? What kind of fan coil is it? It may be in the CMMS, but what oftentimes happens is it got swapped out 3 years ago. Nobody updated it.
Yeah.
And it's not the CMMS's fault. That's just what it oftentimes comes down to is time and resources. Meaning, I don't have time. I wrote it on a notebook and it's in my shirt pocket. I forgot to add it in there. And then what happens is I rip that page out and it's gone and blah, blah, blah. Or resources of I'm bouncing from job to job to job, work order to work order to work order. And I physically I don't have the bandwidth to go back and manually enter something. Well, that's where our teams go out and validate what's out there. And then if somebody renovates a building, we go back out. And again, I think a lot of organizations over the years, when they're doing even commissioning, we don't do the full commissioning, of course, but we're doing that validation. It's one and done, meaning there's no ongoing as things change. They never go back out. And it's almost like a contract, and that's it. Contract's done. It's like it's almost the construction approach. I built the building. I turned it over to you. My hands are clean.
This is interesting to me because it relates to a lot of what we see in all different areas and possibly all different businesses. There's changes, people come, people go. We have moments of time or seasons where we're incredibly busy. We have to be focused on a certain outcome we're trying to deliver, and those things can get lost. And one of the central issues, I think, tends to happen is what you just described, where this one and done approach just cannot possibly cut it. And you mentioned something else. So I'm going to try to tie two things together. I do this all the time where I'm, stuff that doesn't go together. I want to try to put it together and see if that kind of works. So we've got the validation that you might do on a facility, certain aspects of the facility, certain assets in the facility. And you mentioned some of these buildings are 80 years old. And that reminds me of the infrastructure and how, critical the degradation of infrastructure is right now. And when we tie all those things together, is the real issue sometimes that to keep an eye on this instead of a one and done approach and to really monitor things and then do something about it. Does it fall upon the leadership and maybe the financial side of the quote unquote business that just never really chooses to see, or they just don't have enough time to see what's really happening from a maintenance or even a repair perspective? They just keep looking at it as a cost. Is that the main thing that really causes that chasm, I guess, if I want to call it that?
I think it is. Well, and keep in mind too, and this isn't, I don't want to overgeneralize, but for the most part, senior leadership within an organization, they're not facilities people. They don't understand, if it can be a snowball. If this unit goes down, it's a chain reaction, potentially. They also don't understand necessarily that some systems don't play nice together. And I mean, it's just the way it is. And by that, I mean, even trying to retrofit or even trying to, you've got a core hospital building and then you build wings off of it. Well, the core hospital may be 100 years old, but now you're implementing systems that are this year with systems that have been in place for 100 years, and not
Yeah.
all of them, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it can be a challenge, and they don't understand that it's not plug and play, and the other challenge too oftentimes is, and this happens virtually everywhere, doesn't matter your industry, buildings change. Buildings are repurposed, spaces are repurposed, which means things move. An air handler that used to manage or used to draw air into these specific buildings, or this particular part of a building, or even a floor, sometimes those are now going into other parts of the building, other rooms, because that's all been repurposed. But that knowledge of what's doing what and all those layered changes over time, and that's the easiest way for me to explain it, is the layered changes over time, that represents a true snapshot of not just the history, but the current state as well. And that's been the gap. The true gap is to understand, not everything changes during a new construction or a renovation. Sometimes you don't move the HVAC. Sometimes you move some electrical or some plumbing or whatever. But other times it's a full renovation, but stuff still maintains, it stays in that space, that doesn't change. It may go back to those drawings from 50 years ago,
Yeah.
or 80 years ago, or whatever. I think being able to see that true snapshot of what really happened over time is the key, and to explain that to leadership oftentimes comes down to putting it in terms that they understand. Hey, listen, remember, 5 years ago when we did that renovation and it touched ORs 1 and 2. Well, by doing the next renovation, it's going to impact ORs 3, 4, and maybe 8 on the other side of the floor. They don't understand that. So putting it into those type of perspectives with regards to, they immediately go to money. Okay. They think, okay, well, the impact on that is we're not going to be able to use, if that goes down, we're going to lose revenue from these 5 ORs. That's real to them. So the communication with leadership really needs to be on their level in a way that they understand, but also it's not, I look at communication as also not a one and done. You have to build that relationship and maintain that relationship with leadership, so it's not the whammy, not the surprise all the time, because they don't like surprises.
No, but well, none of us like surprises aside from the occasional, welcome
Yeah,
surprise.
yeah,
And yeah, I can't think of one of those right now. But what I'm thinking about as you describe all of this is kind of where that one and done thing, I think a lot of us, we know that that doesn't really work, but we want it to because
yeah.
we have so much to do. We have limited resources. Obviously, big thing that comes up in our mutual worlds is skilled trades gap, where
All the time.
maybe there's people that aren't interested in these fields of work, and there's people that are retiring, and with that, there's some progress being made. There's a lot of people talking about it, and I think that matters, and it's really cool, like some of the stuff that you put together that ends up on the internet that can inspire people. But I want to tie this back into the CMMS, where for me, I've often thought the CMMS itself, if it acts as your historian, it allows you to not only get things done, but to look back. Do you think all these things we've been talking about really should be not only documented in the CMMS platform, not just through work orders, but updating information within assets, putting in schematics, lockout, tagout procedures, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then somebody in the organization needs something else besides the CMMS to remind them to keep an eye on the CMMS and make sure it's accurate, not to get people in trouble, but to say, hey, do is the data clean? Is it being used? Are there any gaps? What do you see out there when it comes to no particular systems? You don't have to name any,
Absolutely.
but like, is it a real challenge for people in their day to day to stay engaged with? And then do they have a, I want to say watchdog, but I don't mean it like that, someone that just monitors and administers and make sure that it's kind of dialed in. Do you see or hear things about that all the
Yeah,
time?
well, I hear it a lot, and honestly, I kind of call it the holy grail or the magic bullet. Everybody wants the holy grail that solves everything. The challenge is it doesn't exist right now,
Yeah.
and you brought up a really good point, and it comes down to who maintains these things, who maintains the system, who maintains the work order system. And where I see that the biggest gaps with work order systems in particular is it tends to fall on one person, maybe two, um, and a lot of the information that needs to be input into the system is still scattered. It's
Mm,
in 15 guys' heads, or it's in 15 guys' notebooks, or whatever. And by the time they do have time to get it to that admin, or that person who's supposed to enter all that stuff, it's fragmented. And again, it's nobody's fault. It's just that's the current state of where I hear most people are struggling. The other challenge is that the many of the CMMS systems out there weren't built to do that. The infrastructure behind them wasn't. It's not built to do the stuff that I was describing earlier with the mapping portion, or the as builts, and having those layered effects and things like that. And many of them just they're not going to. That's not even on their development board. That's nowhere they're going to head. And the other thing too with work order systems often is it falls back on the buyer to do the work, meaning the implementation of installing it, getting it, the install and all that will be set up, of course, but the migration of data from if they're in an old system to a new system can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. Other times they start from scratch. Well, if they had the manpower in the first place to do it, they would have done it.
right.
The problem
Right.
is they don't. And then what happens is, are they really better off? And I think where a lot of organizations are struggling is, do I try to do it in-house or do I outsource? And that's again, the in-house, do I have time to do it? Do I have the manpower to do it? Am I going to designate resources to do it in the first place? And really hold to that, because I've heard several orgs that said, yeah, we decided we were going to do it in-house. We started it, and then they pulled the funding the next year. How'd that work out? you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then the flip side of that is we're going to outsource. Well, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier is it an outsource where you do it one time and then you're to maintain it? Or is it part of a process where you just have an outsourced org that from time to time comes in and updates? Because I got news for you. If it oftentimes falls on the internal team, it never gets done. And then that one, when you do it once, you pay to do it once, and it's done. That's a snapshot in time from 2024. Well, what's it going to look like in 2028?
It's a good point you make there, because one of the things we can probably all agree on, and if not, I mean, I think this is kind of a truism. Problems are going to happen. Turnover
Yeah,
is going to happen.
yeah,
Somebody's going to get too busy, too distracted to focus on what they were focusing on, because it just is what it is. There's a quote unquote fire over here, and that's going to take me away from day to day for 3 days in a row. That's a disruption that can then start to kind of grow and
and
be
that's the daily in facilities.
it is. And when we talk about it on podcasts, or we're giving presentations and we're chirping about, oh well, you can do better. Yes, you can do better, but we should all be agreeing that it's really hard, and there
It
is
is.
no magic silver bullet. There's no real easy button, but there is this idea of something consistent, but we still have to kind of keep wrestling with this. We're not necessarily going to fix it. We can improve it, but
Right.
it's kind of, that's what we keep coming back to, I think, in this conversation today, where we we all have a tendency to not go back and revisit. because we can't. We're moving so fast. We've got other pressures. If you're talking about a hospital environment where 3, 4, 5, or 6 ORs are at risk of not being, they cannot be utilized for this reason or that reason that's connected to facilities. I mean, look at the trickle down effect, and we can start to take our facilities operations, so to speak, and I'm saying the management thereof, the maintenance thereof, the fixing or repairing thereof, because a lot of people lump that all together. It's really within very complicated, and they have to kind of work together, but that will start to trickle down into the community and the surrounding things, not just with infrastructure, but something that we talked about at the conference was how you're just into all of this. Like, it's like, yep, where am I going next? Yep, no problem. Yep, staying in a hotel. Yep, next airplane. And I want to at least get that going again in this conversation. Like, where on earth did that passion come from? Like, it's just a thing.
I it's to my core. I feel like it's my mission to help, and to legitimately understand and share best practices of what people are doing and listen. I think that's where many people struggle is the listening part. The pause, take a breath, and the empathy that also comes with that. And I think where organizations can struggle in this world of CMMSs of other softwares is they don't necessarily fix the problem or address the problem. It's you need this because of X instead of wait a minute, you don't need this, you need this or that, or and understanding when it's okay to say, you know what, you don't, I can't help you. That's okay.
That's a good one. That's a really good one, because when you can say no, and that is meant to actually empower both parties, potential
Sure.
client, existing client, and provider, right? Someone like yourself, that I'm here to help. Where can I help? Well, David, we have this problem and this problem, and you're like, I know what to do with that, but this one over there, we just don't do that. And I think, especially in the world of CMMS, one of the tough questions that I think people should ask CMMS providers when they're looking at making a change potentially, which, by the way, I also think, do a really good assessment of what you have first before making the change, because it just might be fine. and but what I'm getting to is this idea behind driving and delivering this value is often lost in translation between the whole leadership group and everywhere else. But I want people to ask questions like, to a vendor, well, can you please tell me what you don't do? Can you please tell me what your non-starters are? Are there any things, because vendors probably know that about themselves. And what I'm getting to here, because I was just rambling and rambling, is I wish more vendors could offer that specificity that empowers people to make better choices on who they engage with, because they both might be doing themselves disservices. Does that any of that kind of resonate?
No, it does, and I think where I kind of, when I start to meet with people or talk to people, and I'm very upfront when it comes to talking to them about what we do and what we don't do, and I'm very upfront and tell them we're not a CMMS. That's not what we do. There's 150 of them out there. Good luck. Have fun. You may be using one that's great for you. That's awesome. Keep doing it. I think where where a lot of orgs struggle is, like you said, asking those tough questions back to the vendor. And I'm asked tough questions all the time. And I think where I benefit and my passion comes from is I don't know what I don't know. And I love that. And I want to come out of every meeting, every discussion I have, whether it's on site at an existing client or a prospect in a booth, from a trade show that we're talking to, or a cold call that one of our reps is making to somebody, and I join the call. It's even if I can't help them, I probably have heard something or know somebody who might be able to. And I think where that's important is it builds that trust. It builds that, you know what, you're here to help me even if you can't help me yourself. You know what I mean? Because they don't forget that. And like I said, the community, they all know each other. And sometimes it's a financial challenge that they can't afford to do something to make that change, whether it's, getting a system like ours or switching a CMMS, like you said. Other times it's other resources that are not financial. I don't have people. I physically can't do it. Sometimes it's time. But I think a lot of times it still comes down to even they don't know what they don't know. You brought up asking the vendors tough questions or even not switching a CMMS. I've had this happen a few times where I've gone to people and they were talking about the challenges with their CMMS. And they said, man, I just wish it would do this. And I said, well, did you ever ask them if they're building that? Ask them.
Yeah.
If they say no, that's still okay. Now but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
ask them that question. Why not? And it's not always going to work in their favor, but at least they asked the question. Now they're informed.
That's that's where like this idea of where did that CMMS come from? How were they born? What were they trying to do? And then the company starts to grow, the CMMS provider, and people might come and go. So some of that might get lost kind of through iterations. And I think that's part of it too. But what really, for me, kind of connects to that is if they can really stay engaged with their clients and their clients can really make some kind of an effort to stay engaged with them, they can find out what's available. We've lost our way in the system. We don't really want to change. Can you help us figure out how to do this, this, and this? Slight warning though, like sometimes what happens is these CMMS companies will listen to those clients, try to help them, and then they start doing all these different things, and it can get really busy inside that system and that platform. So
100%.
I don't know if we're saying, there's one right way, but it sounds to me like what we're saying is if you can make some concerted effort to stay engaged with your CMMS vendor and vice versa, CMMS vendor actually stay engaged with your client. I know it's hard. They're out there chasing numbers and you gotta make quota and you don't have time for this or that. But I think it's beholden on the CMMS providers to always make sure they can be available to their clients. And like, man, Greg, do you realize what you're asking? I said, yes, I do. I used to be in the business and we made it a priority, and it costs money to invest in your clients like that. But then guess what happens is you get very high retention. They're getting the results that they want, much like when somebody reaches out to you or engages your company, you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And I just want everybody to be better. And I
That's
don't know
right.
if that's a high horse thing or whatever, but I'm still going to keep talking about it. I want to ask you a couple of other questions, and we're going to knock out some fun questions and then get you on the road, because I know you got some stuff you got to take care of shortly. I think there's a hurricane coming. So
Yeah, it's
uh,
barreling down.
let's knock these out quick. So number one, with ARC facilities, what specifically should people know if they don't know who ARC facilities is and what you can do for them? Just super brief.
Yeah. So essentially, we manage all the documentation associated with the buildings. We manage all the blueprints for the buildings. We scan all that stuff in, organize it. Now it's delivered on any device wherever the heck they are. They're in the field, they're on a roof, they can access all the historical drawings for their building, and they're all mapped out, showing where they touched renovation, floor to floor, building to building, site to site. The other thing is we map out all the shutoffs, gas, water, power on floor plans, physically with pins, identifying what they are, where they are, what type they are. Same thing with mechanical equipment, all the HVAC, all the water heaters, all the everything associated with your mechanical equipment. Same thing, all mapped out, photos, but also tied back to the equipment records that are exported out of the work order system. But where this is really important is it's all field verified. So all that equipment it is where it is. It's on this floor. You pop that ceiling tile. Here's the make, model, serial number, and all those holes are all filled in. Um, but again, then it comes down to the maintaining of that. Our teams help maintain that, and we're nationwide, and we are where you are. And that's why, as you mentioned, Greg, I'm on a plane. I'm all over the place. I'm in a hotel. I'm on a roof. We are where you are, and our teams travel and listen to what people need, and we build. We're fortunate we have our own dev teams, and so we build everything from scratch. And I'll be honest with you, and I really told you the passion I have for our clients and even non-clients is we built our system by talking to people and saying, what do you need? It was never a build it and they will come. It was hey, what do you need? Let's build this. And we started building different components to fill those needs. And it wasn't anything to compete with any other system that's out there. It was just filling a hole. And what we found is these holes were everywhere. And again, those connectors between the different systems are very easy. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to delivering this stuff where the guys and gals on the team are, and that's in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a thing that's kind of a common theme for me is, boots on the ground, your frontline workforce, the doers have to be engaged in all these various processes, whether it's a computerized maintenance management software solution or something like what you're delivering that has to do with the building mapping and labeling of where these critical components are, because they're all linked together and critical. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be there.
That's right.
There's not going to be a shutoff valve if it's not necessary and serves some kind of critical purpose. And I can't think of anything you could just, we don't need those anymore. So it's kind of elementary in that regard. I want to knock out the fun question segment because the first time you're ever on CMMS radio, you got to suffer through the fun question segment. You ready for that?
I'll do my best.
Number one, what's your favorite music?
Oh, wow. I grew up in radio, so that's tough. I have an eclectic taste. I have everything from, oh my goodness. It's funny, for Christmas last year, our family bought ourselves a record player. So we're collecting vinyl now. I've got everything from Frank Sinatra to the Bee Gees,
Right.
Everything in between. We've got some Rolling Stones, but we've also got some. My wife and I actually went to a Killers concert in Orlando too. So yeah, I'm all over the board when it comes to music. I see your Metallica shirt in the background. So
oh yeah, I like them and a lot of other stuff. I haven't turned the corner yet on some of the typicals that you wouldn't see, but I'm eclectic as well. But I love Metallica and some of the cool stuff they do. They've got a nonprofit called All Within My Hands.
Oh, right on.
Very important. The work that they do is incredible. And just this year, it was within the last month or two, they're now starting to work with all 50 states when it comes to generating these grants through their partners to help city colleges, community colleges that do these skilled trades things. So I'm big on that. So shout out to them.
Well, and they're going on tour again here too.
They're on tour.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard they're doing another leg. They're coming down on my neck of the woods. So, yep.
I'm going to try to get to the one in December out here. It's in Los Angeles. So
that's awesome.
I'll circle back on that. Fun question number 2.
Yeah.
There are no wrong answers with these, David. Fun question number 2. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it does not have to be one that you play. It could be one that you like to watch or support.
Football all day, every day. I'm in my element right now. College, I'm definitely a college football fan. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest, so I'm a University of Oregon fan. Nice. In Florida, I am a Florida State fan. So,
all right.
Also pro, I'm a Tampa Bay Bucks fan. I have been since I was a little kid when they were terrible.
Yeah, that's again. This is just so people can get a kind of a feel for how you are, what you're into.
Yeah.
It's not meant to be, these aren't traps or anything like that. It's just fun stuff. And here's the big one, though.
Yeah.
What is your philosophy, approach, perspective, whatever you want to tell us about work-life balance?
Yeah. Family first, always, to me anyway. But also it's understanding and setting those boundaries for yourself. Understanding what makes sense. I've burnt the candle at both ends for years, but understanding and keeping that open communication, with your work, also with your family, and understanding, that sometimes you got to step away, and that's okay. I think a lot of people really struggle with the idea of vacation. There's a reason you have vacation. Take it, you know, unplug. I have a hard time putting my phone down. But when you're on vacation, put your damn phone down. so, but again, I think it's really setting those boundaries for yourself, but also really, really setting that expectation, even with your own company that you work for, so that there are no whammies when it comes to asking for that type of time off.
Awesome. And no wrong answers, because if it works, if you're chasing it and it works for you, somebody's going to
That's
hear
right.
it, gives them some ideas, and we're all in this together
That's
one
right.
way or another. It's great having you on. I mean, after all
I
this time, we
appreciate you.
finally got it done. So for anyone out there, if you want to get in touch with David Trask, it's David, David, last name Trask, Trask. You can find him on LinkedIn. Just start there. It is ARC Facilities. And please check out his podcast. It's called Facilities Voices. And what's cool about that podcast is you'll get these real conversations where they can dive in, get detailed, and be, kind of all about something that they're trying to solve. And you'll also get conversational elements similar to what we did here. Thank you, David, for being on CMMS Radio.
I appreciate you, brother.
You got it. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.